Hello.
Hi.
Hey
Hi,
there.
Amy and Jared.
Yeah,
How are you?
Meet you. Good. Real quick before we get started, I put it on the website. I put it on the consultation forums, but people always kind of breeze past it. But
Yeah.
we've begun recording our consultations and training sessions, putting them on YouTube. It's helped out a lot, due to COVID and everything. So,
sure.
Yeah.
okay.
That's fine with us.
Um, so I just read up over your consultation form. We have Lake, correct?
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
start
Yeah.
staring out the window.
And it seemed like had a couple of litters, had some territorial behavior, some trust issues.
Yeah.
And then now it's kind of like if someone comes over, it's kind of unsettled for about half an hour before kind of relaxing. And then you've had a couple of trainers. Is that correct?
Yeah. In the past. Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and just fill me in on anything that you think I should know.
Yeah. So we adopted her back right around like January 1st of this year. So we've had her for about 6 months. And when we first met her, she was known as the lazy, the chill dog. She came up right to us. So we didn't think she had any sort of behavioral issues. Um, the fosters told us that she does have a history of abuse and had a few litters before she was about 2 years old.
Mhm.
Um, so we know she does have some trust issues there. She came to the fosters with her puppy, and then her puppy was adopted right away. And then she was very territorial. So it took them, they said, about 9 months to get her to the level where she was able to be adopted. So the dog that we met was completely different from the dog that they first got. So when we had expected for her to have some setbacks when we got her, but we didn't really realize how strong they would be. And our foster parents didn't think that they thought that she had already overcome those aggressive behaviors, because she had lived with two dogs of their own. They've had multiple foster dogs in the house. She had gone to daycare. It seemed like everything was okay. And then we got her, and she started just having aggressive. She's always been very nice to us. We've never been scared for ourselves, but just people coming over, severe separation anxiety. And then this past Saturday, she bit my dad, somebody who she's known for the past few months and has spent, not significant amount of time, but a decent amount of time with him. It wasn't even just like a stranger. It kind of just came out of nowhere. We kind of thought we were over the hump, and then that happened. So we're looking for her to be able to interact with other humans besides us.
So let's go over the incident with your dad.
Yeah.
What's the context?
Yeah, so we were at our family's lake house. It's a place that she has been up to multiple times since probably May. My sisters have two dogs, and they were playing in the yard. I came inside with Lake, was probably inside for about 5 minutes or so. We went back outside, and my dad, who wasn't in the yard before, had come into the yard and was talking, and I opened the door, and Lake bolted out and jumped and bit. I pulled her down, and then she just kind of sat and was staring at me, and just kind of, you could tell she knew she did something wrong, but just was kind of like, yep, I bit him. Um, so,
So that's super common.
okay.
Okay. And I actually just did a video on my YouTube channel going over, I don't know if you guys remember in Detroit, a pit bull attacked the mailman.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, it was like last year, early last year. So I've started this thing now where I want to just educate people on off-leash dogs and like the dangers and the responsibilities that come with it. But one of the things that I say in the video, as an example, is I had a client, and I've had several clients, but one in particular, their neighbor's dog and their dog played all the time. Okay. Then one day the neighbor's dog got out their yard and into their yard. And they opened the door, much like yours, and the dog booked it out, turned around the house, and attacked the dog. Okay. So they're like, why? They're best friends. They play every day. I'm like, because it's kind of like if you wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and you see your neighbor in your house. It's like, what are you doing in my house, right? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. How'd you get in here? There's going to be a lot of questions, right? But I would assume you would assume threat, right? Because obviously that's out the ordinary. It's the same thing for your dog, okay? But because you're a human, you're like, but this was in the day, you know, what's suspicious about during the day. And it was more so just because you said you went inside, your dad entered the yard, so she was not aware, right?
Right.
So dogs, because your dog has a heightened sense of the territorial behavior. Okay, we've known that since the get-go, right? So in that moment, I'm picking up that same vibe of you just opened the door and she sensed something was off. There was an additional being in the yard and goes into territorial mode, right? Now, when you say that she knows she did something wrong, this is a very common statement that I hear all the time. Dogs don't have right from wrong.
Okay.
That's a human thing, okay?
Yeah.
Dogs have what you allow and what you don't allow. So what you perceived as her knowing she did something wrong was most likely in response to your energy, right? Because you know she bit your dad.
Yeah.
Right. So then your energy, either if you're upset and you're scolding her, right, or you're just like, how do you say, emotionally distressed, right? That is actually what's giving you that response. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So we'll make a note of that. What else?
Yeah, I mean, we've made a lot of strides as far as leash reactivity, specifically to other dogs. It was really, really tough the first 3 months or so, where if there was any dog just within eyesight, she was just dragging us every which direction. And I think just generally over time, she's gotten a little bit better. We also started using a prong, which seemed to help quite a bit. She still will, if there's a dog within 50 or 100 feet, she's still very hyper in tune to that. Not as bad as before, but it's definitely still there. And I don't know, we just generally feel like she's a little bit more on guard when she is on leash. But obviously, based on last week, it's not strictly correlated to on leash, because we have had that incident off leash too.
This is the one with your dad, correct?
Right.
Okay, you're referring to. So, with the leash reactivity, or so you're saying on leash, she's more kind of anticipatory, like waiting, right? That something's gonna happen. So, in the instance of your dad, that's just territorial behavior.
Right.
Okay.
In regards to the leash, a lot of dogs will be leash reactive, but off leash friendly.
Right.
Okay, so then it throws the owner, they're like, how, right?
Right.
One is, so we have 4 responses: fight, flight, avoidance, submission. Okay, so if your dog is on a leash, you've removed flight response. Okay, so they have fight, avoidance, or submission. So the on guard can potentially be the fact that she knows that she's tethered to you, that there is no means of running away from a threat. So it's going to make her more defensive. Okay, because you have to think like, as humans, laws and the existence of laws have changed things quite a bit, where you can leave your home and just assume that you're safe for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Because of those laws and because of the presence of cops. In the dog world, they don't have that. It's, kill or be killed. Okay, so once you start to understand the black and whiteness of a dog and the fact that they're not aware of certain things like humans, and you see their world, it allows you to decipher those behaviors a bit more easily. Okay, because I think the ease of obtaining a dog, and any type of dog really, has made people so comfortable with them that they kind of see them as people, and that they assume they think like people. And the answer is that they don't, right? Yeah. So the on guardness when on leash is, again, super common. It's because there is no flight response. So if she can't get away from something, and her instinct that drives her is to survive and replicate, those are the 2 things that she's meant to do, is that if she knows I can't run away from something, that I need to be prepared and be a step ahead in order to ensure not only her safety and her life, but her family's.
Right.
Yeah. So then we start looking at the next level, which is, and if you're familiar with like Cesar Millan, who's the dog whisperer, and he's had several shows and stuff, and he talks about the pack leader and all that stuff, is that if there's no real authority within the home, the dog will fulfill that role. Okay, so in the animal world, there has to be some dominant or energy that's in control. Okay, dominant doesn't mean mean or aggressive. Dominance means in control. Okay, and it's very fluid. So when I walk into homes where both the owners are passive and they just spoil the dog, and they have an assertive dog, or even if they have a weak dog, the dog knows somebody has to ensure the safety of the family, otherwise we're all dead. Right? That's just how they think, right? And that's where a lot of these issues come from. So if you're an authority figure and you're providing discipline and consequence and expectations and stuff, you're just taking that role, and your dog thinks like, okay, well, if I step out of line, you correct me. If you're the one that corrects me and is making all these rules, then I would assume if there's a threat, you're the one that's going to handle it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas a lot of people either get their dog for companionship or presumably for protection. You know, I get a lot of people that'll get like a very strong breed, like a Cane Corso or a Rottweiler or something like that, assuming that the dog's going to protect them. But then they end up with like a chicken, you know, and the dog's scared of everybody, you know, so they have a really big scaredy cat, which is not good, especially if that size of a dog, because when they're acting out, they're not thinking, because they're not wanting that role, but somebody has to fill it, right? So with the leash reactivity, my assumption is just either formal or higher level obedience would correct that issue. And higher level doesn't mean more complicated. It's very simple. It's just the tools that we'd be using. If that doesn't address the issue, then we start to address the behavior itself directly. And I'll talk more about that towards the end of the consultation. The prong collar is much better in terms of that it gives you more control. It also gives you correctional, the ability to correct her should you disagree with something, but you have to apply it as such. Typically, most people, when they pop a prong collar in the dog, they think that the collar itself will fix the pulling or fix the behavior, but it's a tool. It has to be used, and has to be used correctly. Okay. The separation anxiety.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So when we're both working from home now, but when we were in the office, we had a dog walker who would come once a day to let her out, but she was never a chewer, but she would leave 1 to 3 poops on the floor and pee, you know, once or twice a day. And so we try to do smaller amounts of that for about, usually, I don't know, she's probably up to like an hour or so, or she'd be okay. But sometimes too, we'll leave, like in the beginning, I was in another room and she pooped on the floor while I was there. So, and it's not like an urgency thing. We know she's held her bladder for long periods of time when she's tired. More of just that's what she does. She drools a lot as well. And we heard this all from the foster parents before we got her. Beginning to come home to, you know, huge puddle of drool by the door. We think some paw marks on our doors from her scratching it. It's gotten better, but it's also hasn't completely gone away.
So she's never been kenneled?
No. So we were told not to put her in a crate because she's busted out of 2 crates. She's chewed out of like the airplane industrial size ones. So yeah, we've not tried that. Okay.
So separation anxiety, so far from everything that you've listed, is actually the hardest thing to fix. Okay. The aggression or territorial behavior is easy to prevent, easy to control for the most part, because most people, when they come to training, they're expecting, like, you know, we're going to turn the dog around and they're going to be a normal, stable dog, and then life is easy peasy. That's not how it works. Okay, so there's a lifestyle. I educate you so that we prevent a lot of these things from happening. Give you the tools to control your dog, but we also want to avoid certain contacts. And again, I'll talk about that towards the end of the consultation. But separation anxiety is difficult because it's typically either relationship related. Dogs aren't born with separation anxiety. It's just something that's created. Okay. And it happens when you're gone.
Mhm.
That's the hardest part. It happens when you're gone. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying that it's difficult because it requires a lot of structure and requires a lot of change on the human's part. Okay. So when we get dogs here that have separation anxiety, it's usually done within 1 to 2 days. Okay. Because right off the bat, we're establishing structure and consequence and discipline. So the dog knows their place within the facility. And we don't have that emotional attachment. Okay, so that makes things a lot easier for us. Whereas for the human, it's difficult because they'll do things like, let's say, cuddle with the dog and stuff like that, which makes the human feel good, but actually you can reinforce separation anxiety. So they don't want to give up the affection part of it. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that's where the back and forth can come from.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes with correcting separation anxiety, it can get pretty ugly. Because you have to get the dog to detach. Okay. So we actually have a dog right now here who's very much similar to your dog. Okay. He's a 45-pound pit, drools, excessively salivates in the kennel, very vocal and whiny. And I actually have his video up on my YouTube channel where I talk about correcting him with the prong collar to stop the anxiety. And the prong collar is not the appropriate tool for that dog, but it at least give you a visual, because he came in and he's salivating and you see him for like 15 minutes of video salivating. And towards the end, I cut to where he calmed down because we kept correcting him. And then he's laying down very passive, like just relax completely. No salivating, none of that stuff. But it takes a lot of work with the prong collar to get him to that state. Okay. So the other part is for the human is you got lives, to live and jobs to do and things like that, that you're not going to have, how do you say it? Most people can't just up and leave every 5-10 minutes to address their dog,
Right.
So that's a factor in that as well. The pooping and peeing can be a part of the separation anxiety. The dog's so under stress that they can't control their intestines or their bowel movements or their bladder, or they move around so much that all that motion makes them have to go, so it's kind of like for humans, if I go on a long walk, I may have to use the bathroom afterwards because all that constant motion, gets your body going. It's the same for the dog, except they're being fueled by the anxiety. Okay. The way I have a plan for approaching the separation anxiety, but out of everything you've listed, that would be the most difficult thing to address. Okay. Just so that you know. It's possible if we really regulate the food and the water intake, it'll make the pooping and peeing either happen much less, or if not eliminate that. The salivation is some dogs just do it. Like you can stop it, but it's difficult. Okay. What I care about is the dog is not ideally not defecating or releasing themselves and not being destructive. So like you said, she busted out an industrial or airplane crate.
Yeah.
I had a dog in particular who was had so much kennel anxiety that it chewed off its own tail overnight. Okay, so it gets pretty bad, and the person was like, how does the dog eat its own tail and not feel the pain? I'm like, because the emotional stress is so great that it overrides the physical stress. So that's the only thing I would think about. The other stuff, I deal with all this all the time, but that's the only thing that I would say would be a little tricky to work with is the separation anxiety. Okay. Anything else about Lake here?
I think we've covered most of it. And yeah, our number one thing is just to be able to be around other people with her.
Sure. Okay.
That's our, like, if we could only pick one thing to do, I would like, have her be in the house, not leashed with other people.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a minimum and maximum of what we can expect. Okay. Because every case is different. And then how much progress you want to make is determined by the length of time that you choose. Okay. So the way I approach things is I come in and I go, what's the problem? What do you need? What do you want? Okay. This is what I would suggest. Right. So the leash reactivity is typically about 2 classes, maybe 3. Okay, the first thing we would cover is leash walking. Okay, my style of leash walking, which is if I take 1 step, the dog takes 1 step. If I take 5 steps, the dog takes 5 steps. When I stop, they automatically sit. And this is with a completely slack leash, up to no leash should the owner want. And I don't care what the environment is. Okay, I don't care if there's dogs, people, rollerbladers, skateboarders, strollers, all that stuff, baseball games. Completely busy environment. I want that level of discipline. Okay. The theory here is the dog is so focused or more concerned about you that they don't respond to what they would typically respond, like let's say dogs on leash. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't happen, so we come in week 1, we do some real foundational stuff. I go, here's your homework, do your homework, and then come class 2, you're my report card, right? How'd it go? Jesse, it was terrible, same level of reactivity as it was before. Or, hey, it was better. We saw a bunch of dogs she didn't react to, she reacted to a few. I go, great. Who did she react to? Puppies that were jumping and barking and really excited dogs. I go, great, not out the ordinary, because there's a spectrum in terms of how things progress. Typically with reactivity, human reactivity, like runners, skateboarders, and stuff like that, is usually the first thing to go. Okay. Then it's calm dogs. Excited dogs or puppy type energy is like in the middle. Other reactive dogs, and then sudden run-ins when dogs, like if you turn the corner and dog, right? Those are end of spectrum. Okay. So if you told me yeah, she's walked past a few dogs, no issues, but it was like the excited dogs or the reactive dogs that were a problem, then I say that's good. That's what I would expect. Okay. Class 2, we work on a few things. We make a few tweaks. See you next week. You come back week 3, how to go, even better or the same. I go, okay, if we've not made any progress, what we thought with the foundational stuff, now we're going to start applying consequence for things that we don't want. Okay. So obedience and behavior are 2 different things. Okay. I really don't care about the heel, the sit, the down, the stay stuff. I care about the discipline behind it. Okay. So I want you to think of obedience as education and behavior as morality. Okay. Don't jump, don't bark, don't bite. Don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat. Sit, stay, come. Math, English, science. Okay. So in the human world, you can have someone who's a genius, but be a terrible person. You can have someone who's a very good person, but not be the smartest person, right? Mm-hmm. They don't correlate. The same thing with the obedience stuff, okay? But there's a little bit of a gray area because there's tools that we can use, right? So it's not that if I use a prong collar, have you ever used it to correct her for things like by pulling on it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that what you're doing is a correction, right? The prong collar was meant to mimic a dog bite. Because that's how dogs correct each other, discipline each other, they bite each other. So if I told her to sit and I have to correct her with the prong collar, it's not the sit that really helps her, it's really the correction behind it. Does that make sense? Because now she's learning consequence. But the problem with prong collar is if you're not using it correctly, or 2, if the dog is at a 20 and your hardest correction is a 10, you're never going to match 20. And that's where we start to fall short with the prong collar.
Okay.
So e-collar, so I'm predominantly known as an e-collar trainer. All the dogs that I train, 6 months and up, are on an e-collar, okay? Because it's easy to use. I don't have to worry about that, the dog, not being receptive, because I can almost always match the dog's intensity, because it's not about physical force, it's about muscle stimulation, okay? It gets me off leash control, and I can correct things without conflict. Okay. So if I have a dog that's being aggressive towards a human because it's scared, okay, it's not being aggressive to do harm, it's being aggressive to protect itself. Okay. So even as the owner, if the dog is being reactive and you crank them with the prong collar, you cause confusion and conflict because the dog goes, hey, I'm scared here and I'm trying to protect us and you're over here correcting me, right? Because they see the leash and it's tied to you. With the collar, the dog don't know where it's coming from. The dog just knows when they act a certain way, it goes off, and then when they stop the behavior, it goes away, okay? So we remove conflict. So when we do the leash exercise, I'm layering in that e-collar in the dog's head to see like, what will this fix? Okay. What will proper discipline fix? Okay. And I think 3, maybe 4 cases that came to me trained on the prong collar, and the owners kept having issues. Then we popped them on e-collar, and then within a class, 2 classes, they're turning around because we're able to match the dog now. Okay. So most people would think, if we get aggression, we just come in and tackle the aggression, right? It's super rare when I do that because in most cases, dogs are coming from a valid place in their world. In your case, like let's say, for instance, the yard bite, that's a valid bite to your dog. She was protecting the territory. It just happened to be your dad.
Right.
You see that? So when we address those things, we're wanting that neutrality or neutralness, so that the dog, we don't get any tension between the dog and whoever it is they were targeting, or there's no conflict or confusion between the dog and the handler. The dog just thinks like, okay, well, I thought about doing that and something happened, I didn't like it. So what happens if I don't do anything? Nothing. Oh, okay, so it must mean you're not a threat. Okay, so that's how we can start like socializing and stuff. So the first 2 classes are definitely leash walking. The third class is typically, if needed, a review or changing a few things on the reactivity to address it, and then we continue progressing. Okay, the lake house thing, what we would do there is, remember, like, you can't communicate to your dog if someone comes into the yard unannounced when she's not aware of it and say like, hey, by the way, someone walked in the yard.
Right.
That's not going to happen. But that's where control comes into play. Okay. So if I open a door, like, my dogs don't go barging out. Okay. Which is part of the problem, because once they go forging out like that, they're in this state of like, what's going on? And that's where it leads to the next thing. Okay. We always want passiveness. We always want thresholds, and things always done by permission. Okay. We can, how do you say, try to create moments where that happens as a security measure, in case maybe you open the door and you're not aware that someone entered the yard, and we don't get that. But the best approach is always prevention.
Yeah.
Okay? So, because what's going on in your yard, what's going to potentially happen in half an hour. If I ordered something from Amazon, it's going to be here in a day or 2. Your dog doesn't. Right? So it's really just education, preventing things, but then at the same time having the means of stopping it in case it happens, because that's just life. Okay. The separation anxiety, I have a few exercises that we would do to start targeting that. My suggestion is reviewing or revisiting the kennel. Otherwise, you may have to deal with a pooping and peeing dog in your home. That's just, that's gonna be the hardest thing to approach.
Okay.
In terms of socializing, because you said you would like her to have guests come over and have her loose, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What we definitely want to do is start muzzle training. Okay. And I would start that today. Okay. If you have not done that already, I don't care if you work with me or another trainer. If you're going to do that, you have to have muzzle. Okay. Because it's going to put you at ease, and it's going to put your guests at ease. Because in order to get her to become sociable, you have to put her in social interactions, which increases risk, right? So the muzzle will make everybody feel better. And if something happens, you can address it, but then keep her within the context. The problem most people have is when they have an incident, they'll take the dog and remove them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The dog doesn't learn how to stay within the moment to deal with what happened. Okay, so that's very important. If we have 2 dogs get into a fight, I stop the fight and I let them sit with each other for the next 2 hours. Okay, so the last thing they remember is, yeah, we got in a fight, but we were addressed, and then we had to deal with each other for 2 hours after that. Whereas when people separate, almost always when they try to bring dogs back together, it's fight, because that's the last thing they remember. Okay. Now, there's also another part to the door, which is, when someone knocks, like, again, Dad's going to come at around 6 o'clock. And when you hear that doorbell, you can assume it's Dad. right? Lake doesn't.
Right.
For her, it's just who's behind the door. All I know is when I hear that doorbell goes off, somebody is here, right?
Mhm.
Now, friendly or sociable dogs, they hear the bell, they bark. It's an alert, somebody's here. But when you open the door, they go from suspicion, like what's behind the door, to they see a human and they love people, so they go, oh, it's a person, and they just switch, right?
Yeah.
In your case, because you have a territorial, more territorial type dog, she triggers, the door opens or whatever, and then she stays stuck in suspicion. That's why it takes her 30 minutes to settle, okay? When ideally, when that doorbell goes off, because you have two contexts, you have your guest and you have your dog. And people try to always address the guest as soon as possible before addressing the dog, okay? Or if they do address the dog, they'll pull the dog back as they're opening the door, and they'll just say like, ignore my dog, or it's okay, they're friendly, or what have you. But what happens if you're pulling your dog back, you're actually creating more frustration, okay? And you're amplifying the behavior. So then when you let your dog go, it's like a catapult, okay? If you've ever done that before. In some cases, I don't think this would work for you, some people will work around it by putting their dog in a room, and then the guest comes over and they wait like 15 minutes and then they let their dog come out. So they avoid the whole door out context.
Yeah, we've tried that.
Yeah.
We
And what happens in that
got her
case?
on a leash, and she's still, and we'll have the guests like throw treats at her, and she'll, sometimes she'll be okay. Other times she'll get close and just try to like snap at them.
Yeah.
And so we don't know what to expect from her. So
you would get two things, I would presume. One is what you just said, right? And part of the problem is you bring her back out on the leash. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, the incident with your dad would tell me otherwise, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, well, what do we do?
Right.
Yeah.
So then I have an exercise that's not obedience related. It's about communication, because dad's behind the door, right? And she's essentially bullying anybody from entering to protect the territory.
Yeah.
So you have to bully her back because you're her family. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, if, a single parent has kids, has a day come over, and the kid's going like, no, we're not going to let this person come in, like just harassing them, right? Making it very uncomfortable because they want them to leave, right? It's the same thing, but with a dog. Okay. And dogs bite.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's kids that bite too, but so what we'd want to do is communicate and back her off, and you're being territorial back, and you're saying, yo, like your behavior, thanks for letting me know, but we need you to shut up and calm down and relax, because the person behind this door is a guest, right? Mm-hmm. So when you shut down territorial behavior, there technically shouldn't be anything to fuel the bite, okay? Because the bite don't look at it as a flat out, my dog bit someone, right? She was being territorial, which led to the action of biting to protect the home. Does that make sense?
Right.
Right. So when you shut down the territorial behavior and you're like, we don't need you to do that right now, right? When the person comes in, we shouldn't see anything. Okay. If everything works like it's supposed to, in the beginning, I would anticipate there's going to be no interaction. Okay. And you might think, well, she's seen my dad 100 times, right? Mm-hmm. But because of that territorial behavior of suspicion, it's never allowed the brain to think like, oh, I've seen you several times and nothing bad ever happened. So I guess I can trust you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you have to shut it down, because when she shuts down at 30 minutes later, she's doing it on her terms. So she can always start right back up again, right? But when you start putting things on your terms, that's when we start to see change. Okay, because it's not going to take 30 minutes. It's going to take 30 seconds. Okay, because you told her to. And then we bring guests in, and then we see how does this work out. Okay, and I don't worry about, the treats or her like cuddling next to the person. I always want coexistence. That's the first thing we always get, is coexistence. Okay, once we achieve that over time, we may get her to the point where she starts to open up and go like, oh, like I've seen you 100 times and I've seen you 40 times, and okay, like there's never been any issues, and I can relax around you. I don't have to be on edge. Okay. But we would still avoid certain contexts, like, entering the yard unannounced or things like that. Okay. Because again, just like with my story I said earlier about my client whose dog played with the neighbor's dog hundreds of times, because it just happened very quickly and the dog's not thinking, they still had an incident. Okay. Question so far?
I was thinking about, so we have in our apartment building back in Chicago, there's 6 units in there and a couple of them have dogs. And one time she was out, I feel like she's all over the board. I never know when she's going to react and when she's not.
Sure.
So we were out in the backyard once and the owners had 2 other dogs. They came out and she was off leash and the 2 of the dogs got along perfectly fine. So is that like an instance where she didn't feel threatened by those dogs coming in, or she wasn't territorial of the environment? Or is there any explanation for why she was okay in that situation?
Repeat that story again, please.
Yeah, so I was out in the backyard with Lake. It's a shared backyard, and one of our neighbors had 2 dogs and came out into the backyard unannounced. And shame on me, I didn't have enough time to grab her before the dogs came out, but they were fine. They all ran around and played together. And was there something about that instance where people entered the yard?
Well, in that case, there's a few things that it could have been. One was you're already in the yard.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's not the coming out and going, whoa, how did you get in here? Does that make sense? There's more awareness. The other thing would be if she's more so leaning towards dog social, right? That even though the 2 dogs came in with the human, like for instance, I've had dogs that were wary of people, but if somebody came with the dog, they would forget about the person. Does that make sense? Because they were so dog social that that the fact that dog came with the human, they were more mentally engaged with that yes, they're aware of the human, but they didn't take them as a threat because of the dog. Does that make sense? It put them more in a social mindset. Those are the 2 things I would pick up. The other thing is dogs can do behaviors with one species, but not another. Okay. So like, for example, the dog earlier who attacked the neighbor's dog, right? Yeah. This didn't happen, but as an example, let's say they did the same thing, but instead of a dog being in the yard, it was, a friend or something that was unannounced. And the dog might run up to them, but in a friendly manner. So then they might think, well, why would it attack the dog, but not the human? It's never concrete, with anything, because we are each individual, our individual selves. So like, are you guys familiar with resource guarding?
Yeah.
Yep, like food, like aggressive with food and water and stuff. There's some dogs that'll guard food from other dogs, and there's some dogs that, but not humans, and there's some dogs that'll guard food from humans, but not dogs. Okay, so it can work a lot of different ways. And the other thing is just like, and then maybe that worked out, but then I hope this doesn't happen, so knock on wood. But maybe a year from now, you do the same thing, but she does.
Right.
Right. And because nothing's concrete.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell everybody, like, for instance, off-leash dogs, like we had an incident here and the dog is friendly. Okay. But I've trained myself and my employees to always assume threat because we have dogs in our care. Right. And they're like, but the dog is friendly. I'm like, it doesn't matter. We have to assume threat because we have, if we don't and something happens, that's our responsibility.
Right.
And I've been doing research and watching videos, and there was one of a dog that got off leash that was always friendly, but then in this one particular instance actually attacked the kid.
Right.
Okay. So there's a lot of variables that go into play. So I tell everybody, you always want to err on the side of caution. Have the control, and it's kind of like I have it. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, is what I always say. Okay. Sense. And that's what I educate. Not even humans are that reliable.
Right.
But people expect dogs to be that reliable. Yeah. So I don't pick up anything terrible here. Okay. I just think it's more so proper education and just knowing the possibilities and then how we prevent these possibilities from happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other weird thing, well, you probably won't think it's weird, but we do. She won't necessarily walk if it's just one of us. So I don't know if it's something with her territory. Like we both have to be together to go on a walk more than 100 yards away from our place. And it doesn't even need to be like our apartment. It could be a family's house. It could be the place that we stayed that night.
Yeah.
Is that something that we can correct? I'm assuming it's something that we're doing.
Yeah, that's part of the separation anxiety,
Okay.
right? Needing everybody to be all in one place. Okay, so that's actually easy.
Okay.
We should actually be addressing that day one with the leash walking stuff.
Okay.
So I'll start talking to you about e-collar and how it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
So e-collar, have you guys ever been to a physical therapist or a chiropractor?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever had stem therapy?
Actually, yeah, back in a while ago, I've heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so e-collar and that machine are the same.
Okay.
Okay, so people tend to think of e-collar as like a taser or like sticking your finger in the outlet, right? So it's electric, but it's not electricity. Okay, so it's not like a taser or anything like that. It's actually what I call a miniaturized TENS unit. It's electric, so there is a slight current that moves just the muscle where they're making contact, much like the human version. If they put it on your arm, you'd only feel it right here, okay? In my opinion, I believe it's more refined than the human version. In the human version, there's still risk of electrocution. If you have a pacemaker, they have to be very careful. And 3, there's risk of electrical burn, okay? We don't have that with e-collar. We don't have any electrical burns. It's fully waterproof, so there's no, risk of electrocution if water is involved or anything like that. And I've used it on dogs with heart murmurs, seizures, a bunch of like medical disabilities and all that stuff, and they're perfectly fine because it's just a contraction. Okay. So, have you ever pulled up and pushed down? So you pull up on the collar and push down on the butt to make leg sit.
I don't think so. No.
No. Have you ever seen anybody do that before?
Don't believe
No.
so.
Okay. So it's a method of getting a dog to sit. You pull up on the collar and you push down on the butt. And the way the mechanics work is it shapes this response. Okay. So we're using physical pressure to get the dog into a sitting position. The way we layer in the e-collar and the way we teach with the e-collar is very much the same. Okay. Is the e-collar is causing a contraction, which is pressure, and we can increase the pressure by increasing the level of the e-collar. And as I direct the dog into what I want them to do, I'm also remoting, making it uncomfortable for the dog. And no one likes discomfort. If you find yourself in an uncomfortable situation, your brain tells you to figure out how to stop it, right? Either remove yourself from the situation or do something to make it go away, right? It's the same thing with the e-collar. So the dog feels it, they go like, I don't like this. And eventually through guidance, the dog will put their butt down and then everything goes away, okay? And the dog gets back up and then we repeat that process and then everything goes away. So the dog starts to go, oh, every time I feel this, if I do this, everything disappears. And we start to shape things, okay? But I use pressure to shape everything. Most trainers would teach to sit with treats first, right? They teach the behavior. And then they'll put the e-collar or the prong collar on, and then they'll tell the dog to sit like in a distracting environment. The dog's distracted, so therefore they don't sit, and then they go zap or they go yank, okay? That is the worst way to train because the dog doesn't connect the two, right? So like if my mom growing up told me, Jesse, if you don't do your homework, I'm gonna spank you, right? And I didn't do my homework and I got spanked later. I could tie that back to the fact that I didn't do my homework. Dogs don't do that, okay? So it ends up coming like out of the blue to them, and it can cause more issues because they don't know why it happened, okay? When we shape everything from beginning to end, the dog has a concept of like why it happens and how it turns on and how it turns off. So if I have to correct them, they understand why it's happening, and it's not seen as like, what the hell was that, okay? Every dog's level is different. Personality type doesn't matter, whether they're anxious, nervous, fearful, or stable. Breed doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. I could have, I had a 20-pound dog for once, for instance. It was a miniature schnauzer, and her number, and my collar goes to 127 in increments of 1, okay? Her number was 80, okay? So her number was 2/3 of the power, and you would see these really big contractions. She wasn't yelping, she wasn't in pain, but that's what made her do the obedience. If we did anything less than 80, she wouldn't listen, okay? And I've had pit bulls. My pit bull is trained on like an 8 to a 12, okay? and she's a 65-pound dog. Okay, so it doesn't matter about breed or size or anything like that. Every dog, every being has their own type of physical resiliency and level. Okay, so when it comes to the reactivity stuff, we can both use e-collar to teach things, and we can use it to stop things as well. Okay, so for behaviors, so for instance, we'll take the territorial behavior as an example. Dogs use physicality to reinforce things, right? So when she was surprised by your dad being in the yard, she used physical touch to get him to want to leave the space. Okay, that's how that was the intention, really. So we're in essence using physicality back to stop things that we don't want. Okay, so if she did something that another dog didn't like, that dog might potentially bite her to say, "Don't do that to me." Okay, so in order to stop things, we have to quote unquote bite her in order to dissuade her from repeating it in the future. Okay, so like I was raised old school, I was spanked, you know, and if I didn't do my homework, if I didn't do my chores, or if I talked back to my mom, spank, spank, spank. Okay, dogs is the same way. If she jumps on a dog, or if she plays too rough with a dog, or maybe she's annoying them by barking, that dog would go bite, bite, bite to stop each and every one of those behaviors. Okay, so that's the meaning of aversives, and they're healthy. Aversives are healthy. It's what prevents bad things from happening when used correctly. Okay. Questions about any of that stuff?
No, that
I
makes
don't
sense.
think so. Yeah.
Let me think here. A very common question that I get is, when does the e-collar go away? Right. So I like to refer to the e-collar as a cop on a collar. You guys drive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're you guys go on the expressway?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you go the speed limit?
Yeah.
Not always.
Yeah, right. Like 98% of people that I talk to and ask that question will shrug and say, not always, right? But what if there was a cop present? Would you still speed?
No.
No.
Right, because an authority is present, because there's risk of consequence, right? Dogs are the same way.
Okay.
So it's not about my training methods. It's not about my training skills, your training skills. It's opportunistic behavior, okay? If a dog can get away with something, why not do it? Okay,
Right.
just with humans. So the e-collar is present when you need it. Okay, you're gonna have guests come over, you pop it on her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe you're gonna have people in and out the yard, you pop it on her. You're gonna take her for a walk and, you know, all that stuff, go outside, go to a friend's house, you have it on her. Okay. In a lot of cases, yes, the dog will behave better because cop is present. Okay, it's nothing good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. Okay. And then when you don't need it, you don't have it. She's a great dog in the house, you don't use it. Okay. In some cases, like for instance, let's say with people coming over, let's say you're going to have 10 guests come over, right? Is I've had clients whose dog is very similar. They'll have the collar on the dog, and then after so many guests, the dog is like completely relaxed, and then they remove it 15 minutes later. You know, because once everything's happened, the dog's no longer being set on edge because of the doorbell ringing, that they're not worried about it. And they're like, yeah, it's never been an issue, so we remove it after 15 minutes, the dog's perfectly fine. All right, cool. Then that's your answer. In other cases, it makes the owner feel better to always have it on the dog.
Right.
They say, that's fine too. You know, my job is to make you feel comfortable and confident in the skills that you have to address your dog, right? And then how it looks for you may be different than how it looks for another family, okay? There's no real right or wrong here. It's just what's going to work.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think here. Obedience wise, or actually, if you could have the life that you wanted with Lake, okay, and don't worry about her behavior and stuff, just if you could have the life that you wanted with Lake, what would that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be just being able to be around other people and dogs without anxiety of what's going to happen. And then also just being able to leave her for certain periods of time, knowing that like her world isn't ending.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. Yeah, I'd love to be able to leave her for the weekend with a friend, and not worry about her biting them or things like that. Being able to take her to a friend's house that has another dog, and the dog just be able to coexist.
Okay. Do you ever take her anywhere hiking off leash or anything like that?
No,
No?
I mean,
Okay.
it would be great if we could, but we don't trust her really off leash.
Sure. If you could take her like out to like a patio or something like that, restaurant patio.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great. I think we've kind of set our goals even lower than that, just with reality. If that's possible, we'd absolutely love for that to be able to happen. But I think one step before the next, we're kind of more focused on just being able to interact with our friends and family without worry.
So most people set their standards pretty low.
Yeah.
E-collar and the way I use e-collar allows us to actually go beyond that.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a length of time and minimum and maximum that we can expect. Okay. If your primary concern is the leash reactivity, the territorialness in the house, and having people come over, that's my 6-week program. Okay. It's 1 day a week for an hour. So 6 classes. And then what we've also done is, due to COVID, we've added in 2 complimentary Zoom sessions. So you're really getting 8 hours worth of work for the same price of what it was before. Okay.
Right.
The way I would see that progressing, of course, is first 2, maybe 3 classes on the leash reactivity. And then we'd move into the addressing the front door issue. That would most likely have to be done over Zoom. Okay. I do have a video, so it's partially, me educating you and working with you in person, but then also I'll send you videos of other training sessions that we've done to give you a visual. Okay. So I would say, hey, watch this video, and then we'll have a Zoom. We'll clear up any loose ends that you didn't pick up or maybe didn't fully understand. And ideally within that session, we'd have someone come over so that we can practice it while I'm there to coach you through it, via Zoom.
Okay.
And then it's play it by ear for everything else. Okay. Because obviously progress is what dictates how we move forward. Okay. If you're wanting more control, 9 weeks, we could get, for instance, this stuff here, and I would prioritize recall, which is come when called, because that's like the most important command. And then the 12-week program that I have is everything. We teach all the obedience, sit, stay down, come, place, heel, and we target the behavior stuff. And the behavior is a variable, okay? So if we're struggling with something and that takes, maybe 3 classes, and we've used 2 on heel, then we use 3 classes to fix a particular behavior, that leaves us 7, right? Is we may not be able to tackle all the obedience stuff, but I'll prioritize, because I know what I've done this for so long that I know what's going to be useful for people, and I teach it in that order. So come the 12th class, if everything's good, you're like, hey, we got a lot of control. We're very happy with what we got. And I go, great. Even though we didn't cover everything, as long as you're happy with what you got, then I go, thank you for the opportunity. Let us know if you need anything. Okay. Mm-hmm. If we reach the end of the 12 classes and because of behavior, we didn't cover all the obedience, but you really want whatever is left over, I would tell you, it's going to be like 2 or 3 classes and we can just invoice you and prorate it. And then we finish that off. Almost always when people do the 12-week stuff, I don't think I've ever had anybody extend the class because we're able to cover almost everything within that time frame. Okay. And Maria, I'll give you the prices, but Maria will go over the pricing with you. The 6-week is $825, the 9-week is $1175, and the 12-week is $1550. You do get your consultation credit. You get the full credit, and that will go towards your program. In terms of the collar Lake would need, you have, because she's 65 pounds. Okay?
Yeah.
So you technically have 2 options here. One is meant for 70 pounds and under. One is meant for 70 pounds and over. Okay. When I deal with bully type dogs, bulldogs, pit bulls, Rottweilers, like the very powerful breeds, I always, especially if they've got any aggression issues, will recommend for the owner to opt for the higher powered collar. Okay. All that means is you're getting more from less. Okay. So the one that's for 70 pounds and under is 287-ish with tax. And the one for 70 pounds and over, which is the one I recommend, is about 352-ish with tax. Okay. Now that particular collar just got discontinued, but you can still find some on the internet. There's a eBay seller who I just bought one from yesterday. I would send you that link, and I would suggest, if you can, I would just get that collar, because in my opinion, it's the best collar. And the reason why I recommend that is I actually have another case that we're working with. It's a pit bull, about 65 pounds. And I borrowed them a collar because they were having issues finding this particular collar that I'm telling you about. The dog's number was 7580 out of 127, the first class, okay? But it was on a lower powered collar. They got the appropriate collar. The dog's number is now 50, okay? So that 80 and 50 are very much equivalent, but they're able to get that much more power from a lower number. So the reason why I tell people you want the power is in case if a dog kicks into aggression, you have to account for the state of mind, the intensity, and the adrenaline that's going to the dog's body, and being able to have enough power to cut through all that and get them to stop the behavior, okay? The way that we go about things, ideally, we never have to do that. But in case things go south, I want to know I'm going to have a much higher probability because I have the appropriate collar for the situation. Okay. Questions?
I think that makes sense. I know you said to start muzzle training now. Do you have like a muzzle that you recommend, or how do you start that? Is it like 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, gradually?
Baskerville is the brand I recommend.
Okay.
You can get them on Amazon. It's like basket, but with an R, Baskerville. She's most likely a size 3 or 4, and you'll have to measure the snout to get those correct measurements. Sometimes clients will buy a size below and above. So if it says 4, they'll buy the 3, 4, and 5, just in case, so they don't have to worry about getting the wrong muzzle and then having to send it back and then getting the appropriate one. In terms of conditioning, I do have videos on my YouTube channel. We also have a resource page on my website where we send people for muzzle training, the training tools that we recommend, things like that. And what I do is once you get the muzzle, you can get like a Ziploc bag and you put it on the inside of the muzzle and you put the outside of the bag wrapped around the rim of the muzzle. And it creates a nice little baggie. So you can just pop, like I just use the dog's kibble or whatever their meal is for the day. And I'll put a little bit and the dog eats, a little bit, the dog eats, and I keep repeating that. Okay, so every meal is eaten out of the muzzle. I also suggest that you stop any treats or anything that's not a part of the diet, because people try to do muzzle training with treats, and treats aren't necessary to her daily nutrition, right? So for the dog, if they don't like the muzzle, they're like, nah, I'm not gonna eat those treats because I know I'm gonna get my meal later in the day and I don't really need that stuff. Okay, but if you're using her actual diet and making her eat from the muzzle, that tends to work much better. If I present the muzzle and the dog goes, I'm not eating out of there, then I put the food up and the dog doesn't eat till the next meal. Okay, then at the next meal, I bring it out again, the dog goes, nah, I'm not gonna eat, and I put it away. I keep doing that. And maybe by day 3 or 4, the dog goes, I'm really hungry. And the only time I've seen food is when that muzzle comes out. Let me give it a shot, and then they start to eat from it. And then I go, great, now you're learning that the muzzle is a good thing and that's the only way you're gonna eat. It's very tough for the people emotionally.
Right, so she's probably a couple of days without food.
Yeah, it's dogs will not starve themselves to death. It's against instinct. Okay. It's humans make my job more complicated than
I'm sure we're gonna be terrible.
Yeah. But that care that you have for her in terms of like, let's say with the feeding and stuff, I understand where you're coming from, but that actually partially empowers the separation anxiety.
Right.
Because you care too much about her, right? And it's not that I don't care about your dog, but it's that non-caring that actually makes her more independent.
Okay.
Okay. Question?
Yeah, one other thing that the more you talk about the like the caring for the dog, and probably in our case the over caring, I realize how much we're probably doing to make some of this happen. We've had a hell of a time getting her to not sleep with us,
Oh, sure.
which I would imagine factors into the separation anxiety quite a bit.
Yep.
Well, so maybe that's something we could talk about more during training, but I didn't know if you had any thoughts on how to, because I mean, we tried steadfast for like a full week, and she would just sit there and whine and jump back up, and I would lift her off and she'd jump back up 10 minutes later. So we don't really know how to.
Honestly, I would just leave it for now.
Okay.
It's not going to work against you. I mean, it's already there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Because you need to make her make the decision to leave you alone.
Yeah.
Okay. And e-collar is the only tool, in my opinion, that can make a dog do that.
Okay.
You can try popping the prong on her with a little short leash. You kick her off, and then if she whines to jump up, you actually correct the whining or correct any intent to want to jump on the bed. Even looking at the bed, I correct it. Okay. You could try that. My only concern really would be one, because it took so long to create trust, is because it's so physical, potentially creating distrust.
Right.
We're creating tension between you and the dog, where then she starts to go against you. So like I get people, like they'll get a Cane Corso, and then like 2 years into it, they're like, oh, my dog's a problem. Now I need to discipline them. I'm like, it's gonna be a big problem, because now your dog's 150 pounds and now you're gonna tell it no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And then, so what happens is, in the dog world, they don't give respect. You have to earn it, right?
Mhm.
And you earn it through giving consequence and holding expectations and standards to things, right? So if you've not established that from day one, if you try to come back later, we're going to get protest, right? But dogs protest by growling, nipping, potentially biting, things like that. And that would be my only concern. I don't really know if it would happen or not, but considering that she's more on the defensive side, and in the fact that it just took a bit to earn the trust in general, I would probably just ignore it and then wait till the e-collar, because that should make things very easy.
Okay, we'll just leave it alone for now.
Yeah. Other questions?
I don't have any more.
Yeah, I think we covered most of them. Yeah.
So Maria will reach out to you. She'll reiterate everything. And then if you want to learn more about how we work and how we operate, you can go to our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Like I said, we've been recording all our training sessions. So if you want to see what e-collar looks like,
Yeah.
a good one would be Astro, which is the Pittie I talked about earlier. His name's Astro. He's already had 2 classes, and you can see the difference between, and even his consultation, because we met them in person. Just the consultation to the first class to the second class, just the difference in that dog, to give you an idea, and just learn more about us. We have been meeting people at Oz Park here in the city.
Yeah.
If you guys are coming out of the city, it's possible that we could meet you at Independence Park, which is near the expressway. However, Oz Park tends to be a lot more trafficked. So it's more realistic in terms of distraction, people, dogs, skateboarders, rollerbladers, all that kind of stuff. So it may be worth the trek for you guys. And then, Maria will handle everything else. And if you forgot to ask anything, you can just send us an email and then we'll get back to you, okay?
And how's your availability the next couple weeks? So would we be able to get in a session in the next few weeks or so?
It depends on what yours is. I know Saturday and Sunday, I think it filled up. Fridays, I think maybe has a spot. We just opened up Monday for people because I'm partially here at my facility. And to make most of my time, we're having people come to us, which is why we provided a bit more value to the programs. Because even with COVID, like I get clients that are high risk, they're older people and stuff like that. So me going into home to home, creates a lot of potential exposure for them. So it's trying to operate safely, but at the same time, still try to help people. So,
Sure.
Okay.
okay.
Sounds good. We'll look forward to hearing from Maria.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. If you need anything else, you let us know. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.